This man, he's not just dressed to the nines, he's dressed to the 1869s. Why? Because for 3 days, Omaha threw the biggest costume party in American history. And now I'm recreating some of the incredible looks from that event in CLO3D. Let's jump in. I started by changing my avatar proportion to match this man. Let's call him Charlie. As with any CLO3D project, it's all about layers. I began at the base, added shorts, deleted the darts, and reshaped them into pant blocks. Charlie's pants are clearly well tailored, wide-legged with rolled cuff, classic 1930s style. That tells me they're probably his own, not a costume element. I found a wide-legged pant pattern online, applied it to a fabric, scaled it to fit, and made a few adjustments. So the backstory is that in 1939, over 20,000 people dressed in full period costume in Omaha, Nebraska for the premiere of Cecil B. DeMille's Union Pacific. If you're a history buff, you already know about the Transcontinental Railroad, and the Union Pacific Railroad started here and met the Central Pacific from Sacramento here in Promontory Point, Utah. When they drove the final Golden Spike, Leland Stanford, the man Stanford University is named after, swung and missed the last nail. Unlike Stanford, I didn't miss. I think I nailed this look. It's time to move on to the shirt and vest. I had already pulled a button down from the modular library. It gave me a little guff when I arranged the buttons, but with some layering tweaks, I got it to behave. I didn't add sleeves since they would just cause problems during simulation. The vest came from the modular library too, but when I loaded it, the shirt vanished. I didn't notice it right away, so I hit undo like 50 times, saved, and opened a fresh project. It was worth building the vest separately and saving it. Charlie's double-breasted vest is simple, typical of the 1860s. No lapel, just a brocade fabric with piping along the edges. For the fabric, I searched all of my fabric books, the Peter Kepi design library, and I even tried Illustrator's Generate Pattern option. If you follow my channel, you know I can usually make these tools work, but none were able to match the pattern on Charlie's crazy-ass vest. Time to go old school, vector tools and swatches. If you're into textile design, by the way, I've got tutorials for that. I applied a brocade fabric to the textile design and some modest tailoring with a bit of piping. Then it was time for the cravat. They seemed like it'd be easy, and of course it was, sort of. So you're probably wondering why all these people were dressing up in period costume, and like I said, it was for a major motion picture premiere right here in sunny Nebraska. But here's the crazy part. Francis Matthews, president of the Omaha Chamber of Commerce, and W.O. Swanson of the Nebraska Clothing Company commissioned thousands of costumes that people would buy for just $1.40. They ended up selling nearly 15,000 of them, and they were all sewn in a matter of weeks. Back to the cravat, I added a buttonhole and finagled the collar button through. After a few adjustments and a different button, the cravat was done. Now onto the frock coat. I found a sloper pattern online and traced it as my base. Denise Winter offers a great contextualization for frock coats and their anatomy, so I used her technical breakdown to trace the back and side and skirt panels. She gives a thorough comparison between contemporary coats and frock coats from the 1860s, which was super helpful. While I was making this, I decided it would be easiest to get the pattern block close than drape and tailor it later. In hindsight, there was probably an easier way to do it, but this just worked for me. I adjusted the side panel to match the front sloper, added a curve for the rear armhole, and it was ready to be arranged. Then I sewed and simulated. Now onto the pleating, sleeves, and lapel. I traced a two-part sleeve from the same source and made a few adjustments. After positioning the pattern, I used the MN sewing tool. Okay, let's add some buttons. And I'll tell you about Rita Shelley. She wrote an article about the event in 2022, and she says that 15,000 dress orders were placed within 10 days of the film premiere. Women who didn't buy the $1.40 dress could snag 19-cent yardage and rickrack to make their own, and enter a contest to win a Pullman trip to California. I'm still digging into the menswear side though. It's unclear whether jackets or vests were made for the event, or if some guys just threw together old pieces, like an old last-minute dad on Halloween. I added sewing along the pleat and applied a high fold strength to the outer pattern piece. In CLO3D, fold strength controls how sharply the fabric folds, so boosting it here helps the pleat hold its shape more dramatically in the simulation. Now for the lapel. This was by far the most complicated element. I started by tracing the center seam to create a 2-inch placket. Then I determined where the lapel would fold. I cut a diagonal line, and I flipped that pattern in the 2D window so the outside of the fabric would face outward. This matters because this section gets a second layer of fabric for the lining. I sewed that piece in place and I strengthened it. And I had to do the same cut and flip process for the sloper. I cut from the lapel fold up to near Charlie's clavicle, then cut, sewed, and turned the sewing line. Once everything was placed, I noticed a gap between the patterns, so I adjusted the upper corner point. With that sewing done, it was time to handle the back of the neck. And it's hard to describe what I did here without sounding crazy, so I'll save the specifics for my next tutorial. Hear me now, believe me later. I had to cut, flip, sew, and fold a lot. Okay, next up was another gingham pattern. I created it in Adobe Illustrator. I added it as a graphic and made sure it was applied to both sides of the fabric. Then I scaled it, copied it, pasted it as needed. For the lapel, I added a silk lining. I also cloned the back pattern and placed it underneath. It was time for the hat next. I figured since I hadn't made a top hat yet, what could go wrong? Let's give it a shot. A look at key differences between top hats from the 1860s and 1930s revealed that more modern hats were shorter. Charlie's was likely his own. So my hat was about 4.5 inches tall and had a narrow brim. If you want to make your own, take a look at my tutorial here. I added the hat to the project, and now it's time to pose Charlie. Luckily, Charlie's pose was one that was included in CLO3D, so I set up his pose, hoped nothing would collide, and I just had to make a few adjustments. The last part was making the environment. So I opted for basic meshes in Blender with materials I photoshopped directly from the original photo. You know, I could have added glass materials with objects inside the glass and just kept going with all of that detail, but I really wanted you to pay more attention to Charlie and not the background. So with the model complete, I imported it into CLO along with the cane that I made in Blender. With some last minute pose changes, cool dress shoes, and a spotlight, I think Charlie's done.